Europe, 1943. Dawn arrives with the muffled roar of hundreds of engines. From England, B-17 and B-24 flying fortresses take off in perfect formations, darkening the horizon. Their destination? German factories in the heart of Europe. Their hope? To return alive. But the sky over Germany is a floating cemetery. Allied bombers fall one after another, turned into torches of aluminum and fuel. German Luftwaffe pilots are starving wolves, veterans hardened in Poland, France, and Russia. They fly Messerschmitt Bf-109s and Focke-Wulf 190s, lethal machines piloted by aces with dozens of victories painted on their fuselages. Every mission is a death lottery. Allied crews calculate their odds with bitter precision. 25 missions to complete your tour. Few reach the 10th. The problem is devastatingly simple. Allied escort fighters cannot follow the bombers to their targets. The Spitfire, glorious over England, runs out of fuel before crossing the German border. The P-47 Thunderbolt, powerful and sturdy, cannot reach the depths of the Reich either. Bombers must face the German fury alone for hundreds of kilometers. In Allied strategy rooms, generals stare at maps covered in red crosses. Each cross is a downed aircraft, 10 men lost. The statistics are brutal. On some missions, 20% of the bombers don't come back. The numbers are unsustainable. The air war is being lost. And then, in the middle of this dark panorama, a name appears that no one takes seriously: Mustang. It is a fighter born almost by accident. In 1940, the British desperately needed airplanes and asked North American Aviation to produce P-40 fighters under license. The chief engineer, James Dutch Kindleberger, had a bolder idea. Give us 102 days and we'll design something better. It was an impossible promise. No airplane was designed in 3 months, but they did it. The result was beautiful. Perfect aerodynamic lines, a design that seemed to fly even on the ground. Pilots who saw it for the first time were mesmerized by its elegance. It looked carved by the wind itself. But beauty doesn't win wars. The Allison V1710 engine it carried was excellent at low altitude, perfect for reconnaissance and low-level attacks. But up high, where the important battles were fought, where bombers needed protection, the Mustang choked. Above 5,000 meters, it lost power like a runner with no air in his lungs. The British RAF tested it with high hopes and dismissed it with sighs. Beautiful, but useless where we need it. The Mustang was relegated to secondary missions. Photographic reconnaissance, train attacks, important tasks, yes, but not the ones that would change the fate of the war. Pilots nicknamed it the Doomed Steed, a racehorse forced to pull a plow. Meanwhile, over Germany, the bombers kept falling. Crews looked at the empty sky, searching for escorts that never came, while the Bf-109s descended like hawks upon doves. Time was running out. The Allies needed a miracle. And sleeping under the Mustang's cowling, that miracle waited. It only needed the right heart to awaken. In the Rolls-Royce test hangars, a group of British engineers watched the Mustang with frustrated fascination. They saw what others didn't. It wasn't the plane that failed, it was the engine. One of them, Ronald Harker, a Rolls-Royce test pilot, had flown the Mustang and was impressed by its aerodynamics. The airframe was perfect, the fuselage a masterpiece. Control response precise as a scalpel. But the Allison engine strangled it. Harker had an idea that sounded like madness or genius, depending on who listened. What if we put a Merlin in it? The Rolls-Royce Merlin was the heart of the Spitfire, the engine that had saved England in the Battle of Britain. A supercharged engine designed to breathe in thin air, an engine that didn't lose power at 8,000 meters, an engine that sang. But no one had thought to marry it to the American Mustang. The idea climbed up official channels. There was skepticism, debates, frantic calculations. Finally, someone with enough authority said, "Do it." In October 1942, 5 Mustangs arrived in England for the transformation. Technicians worked like sky surgeons, removing the old heart and implanting a new one. They modified the cowling, recalibrated systems, balanced the weight, adjusted every bolt. On October 13th, the prototype known as the Mustang X rolled onto the Hucknall runway. The test pilot pushed the throttle. The Merlin roared. No, that's not right. The Merlin sang, a deep, guttural, promising sound. The wheels lifted off the ground. And then it happened. The Mustang climbed like no fighter had climbed before. It soared upward with ravenous hunger, as if it had been waiting its whole life for this moment. At 3,000 meters, where the Allison choked, the Merlin was just starting to breathe. At 5,000, where other fighters struggled, the Mustang accelerated. At 7,000, it dominated. The numbers began to arrive from telemetry instruments. The engineers read them in silence, checked twice, 3 times. They couldn't believe it. Top speed, 703 kilometers per hour. Faster than the Spitfire. Faster than the Bf-109G. Faster than the FW-190. Ceiling over 12,000 meters. Higher than almost any operational fighter. And then came the number that would change the war. Range with drop tanks, 3,700 kilometers. It could fly from England to Berlin, fight for 20 minutes, and return home. No fighter in the world could do that. Reports reached the United States like telegrams from the future. Allied commanders read the numbers again and again. Some cried with relief. The search was over. The long-range escort fighter they needed to save the bombers already existed. It had only been asleep, waiting for the right engine. Production orders were issued immediately. North American Aviation converted its assembly lines. By spring 1943, hundreds of P-51B and P-51C Mustangs with Merlin engines, built under license by Packard, began rolling out of factories. American pilots assigned to the new fighter couldn't hide their excitement. They had flown Thunderbolts, good planes, but heavy. They had watched friends die because escorts couldn't follow far enough. Now they had wings that would carry them into hell itself. And hell was waiting over Germany. German pilots didn't know it yet, but their nightmare had just taken off from American factories. The supreme predator of the European sky was about to discover that a new master had arrived. The doomed steed was dead. In its place, a winged warhorse had been born. December 1943. The first P-51B Mustangs arrived at air bases in England. Bomber pilots observed the new silver fighters with cautious curiosity. They had seen escorts come and go, all promising protection, all running out of fuel too soon. This one looked different, sleeker, hungrier. The first deep escort mission launched in January 1944. The Mustangs took off with the B-17s, but this time they didn't turn back at the German border. They kept going, and going, and going. Bomber crews couldn't believe it. For the first time, they saw friendly fighters over deep German territory. For the first time, they weren't alone.
Luftwaffe pilots, veterans of 1,000 battles, saw the silver silhouettes and felt confusion. What fighters were those? Not the chunky P-47, not the short-legged Spitfire. Where had they come from? The answer arrived in .5 caliber machine gun bursts. The first encounter was brutal. German pilots attacked the bombers with their proven tactics, high-speed dives, quick passes, dispersal. But this time, the Mustangs were there. And the Mustangs were faster. A Bf-109G attacked a B-17 when a P-51 appeared out of nowhere, accelerating like a silver lightning bolt. The German pilot tried to escape in a dive, his usual maneuver. The Mustang followed, accelerating even more. The 6.50 Browning spat fire. The Messerschmitt disintegrated. German pilots began reporting strange encounters. An American fighter that didn't run out of fuel, that was faster at all flight regimes, that climbed like a rocket and dove like a hawk, that chased them to their own airfields. By February 1944, Mustang production exploded. Dozens arrived each week, then hundreds. Fighter units re-equipped one after another, leaving their old planes behind and climbing into the new silver steeds. Pilots adored them. It was like going from driving a truck to piloting a race car. It responded to thought, forgave mistakes, and when you pulled the trigger, the 6.50s turned anything into flying confetti. But the real change came with a new tactical doctrine. Before, escort fighters stuck to the bombers like guard dogs. Now, with the Mustang's range, they could hunt. Allied commanders gave aggressive orders: seek and destroy, attack airfields, hunt aeroplanes on the ground, dominate the sky. The Mustangs became unleashed predators. They swept German airfields before fighters could take off. They strafed rows of FW-190s on the ground. They chased U-52 transports and shredded them. They attacked trains, fuel trucks, installations. By March 1944, Mustangs escorted bombers all the way to Berlin. When the first P-51s appeared over the Reich capital, Berliners couldn't believe it. American fighters over Berlin. A veteran German pilot, seeing the silver Mustangs over his city, said something that became legend. "When we saw Mustangs over Berlin, we knew the war was lost." He was right. The Luftwaffe began to bleed out. Veteran pilots, aces with 100 victories, fell one after another. Not because they were bad pilots, because the Mustangs were simply superior and there were hundreds of them. Young German recruits with barely 30 hours of training were sent to slaughter. They took off in Bf-109s or FW-190s, saw the silver formations, and died on their first missions. Their planes, though good, could no longer compete with highly trained American pilots flying superior machines. Even the revolutionary May 262, the first operational jet fighter, feared the Mustang. Not in direct combat, where its speed was unbeatable, but in takeoff and landing. Mustangs lurked near 262 airfields, waiting for the vulnerable moment. Dozens of jets were destroyed before they could use their speed. The sky changed owners. By summer 1944, during the Normandy invasion, the Luftwaffe was a shadow of itself. Allied soldiers advanced under skies controlled by their own fighters. German pilots who still lived flew suicide missions, knowing each takeoff might be their last. Statistics told the story. In 1943, Allied bombers suffered 10 to 15% losses per mission. In 1944, with full Mustang Escort, losses fell to 2 to 3%. Thousands of crews who would have died instead lived. The ignored steed had become Europe's guardian angel. And for the Luftwaffe, the silver executioner that hunted under a sky that no longer belonged to them.
May 8th, 1945. Europe falls silent. The war is over. At air bases in England, France, and liberated Germany, hundreds of P-51 Mustangs rest in perfect rows. Their propellers still, their engines quiet. They have fulfilled their mission. Bomber crews who survived return home. Many seek out the Mustang pilots who protected them, to shake their hands, to say thank you. Some cry as they do. They know that without those silver fighters, they would have been just another statistic, another red cross on a general's map. The final numbers are staggering. P-51 pilots shot down nearly 5,000 enemy aircraft in air-to-air combat, destroyed 4,000 more on the ground, escorted bombers through the most dangerous skies in history, and brought them back. But beyond numbers, the Mustang achieved something deeper. It broke the back of the Luftwaffe, not just with bullets, but with presence. It changed the psychology of air war. Allied pilots flew with confidence, knowing the best fighter in the sky watched over them. German pilots flew with fear, knowing silver fighters could appear at any moment, anywhere, and there was no escape. Fear is as powerful a weapon as bullets. After the war, the Mustang didn't disappear. It flew in the Korean War, facing propeller aircraft and occasionally the new MiG-15 jets. It didn't belong to that era anymore, but still fought with honor. Decades later, surviving P-51s became treasures. Civilian pilots paid fortunes to restore them. At air shows around the world, when a restored Mustang roars over the crowd, everyone stops to look. The sound of the Merlin is unmistakable, a song from another age, a hymn of victory. Veterans who flew it, now elderly, tell stories to their grandchildren. They describe the feeling of pushing the throttle for the first time, the moment they realized they had the best airplane in the sky, the responsibility of protecting others, the pride of having done so. The story of the P-51 Mustang is a lesson about the unexpected, about how an ignored airplane, considered a secondary failure, became the savior of Europe, about how a small technical decision, changing an engine, altered the fate of millions. It's a story about engineers who refused to give up, about pilots who trusted a new machine, about a design so perfect it only needed the right heart to awaken. In 1940, it was just a rushed experiment, designed in 102 days by a company with no experience in combat fighters. In 1945, it was a legend. The winged horse that saved the sky, the Mustang that galloped toward the dawn of victory, carrying the destiny of a generation on its wings. And though the veterans who flew it are disappearing, though the last surviving Mustangs are museum pieces, its legacy remains. Every time a young pilot climbs into a modern fighter, they carry the P-51's inheritance.
Every time someone looks at the sky and feels gratitude for freedom, they should remember those silver fighters that defended it. Because there was a moment in history when everything hung by a thread. When the European sky was hell, when the brave died by the dozens. And then a plane appeared, one nobody expected, a steed with wings, a Mustang, and the sky became ours again.